Rejected after catching her mate cheating, she was claimed by the most dangerous alpha king. Lyra's hands trembled as she held the letter, her eyes scanning the words again, as if reading them a third time could make the pain vanish. She had always trusted him, believed in the promises he whispered on quiet nights beneath the silver moon. And yet, the truth was laid bare in ink that cut sharper than any dagger. Her mate, the one she had given her heart to entirely, had betrayed her. The city outside her window was alive with the bustle of evening life. Torches flickered along cobblestone streets, merchants called out their final cries for the day, and the laughter of children echoed through narrow alleyways. But none of it reached her. Lyra felt as if the walls of her small chamber pressed in, closing around her, suffocating in their silence. Every heartbeat thundered like a warning. Nothing would ever be the same. He had not expected it, not even a shadow of doubt. His promises had been endless, and his touch had always felt like a tether to safety. She had imagined their lives together as a steady current, flowing through years of joy and quiet comfort. Now that current had turned into a storm, dragging everything she thought she knew into darkness. Lyra threw the letter to the ground. The parchment fluttered like a wounded bird before settling in a crumpled heap. Her eyes burned, not with anger, but with a sorrow so deep that it clawed at her chest. She wanted to scream, to demand answers, but her voice had vanished into nothing. She had caught him not days ago in a corner of their home, holding someone else's hand. The memory replayed relentlessly, each detail sharper than the last. The tilt of his smile, the ease in which he had lied when confronted, the way the other woman had looked at him, thinking she owned him. Lyra shivered. The betrayal was not just in his actions, but in the way he had shattered the life she had built around him. Her family had warned her, friends had murmured caution, but she had ignored them all. She had believed in the purity of love, in the strength of her heart, and yet here she was, discarded in the shadow of her own hopes. She could not stay here. The room that had once been a sanctuary now felt like a prison. Every familiar corner whispered reminders of his betrayal. Every shadow seemed to mock her. Lyra gathered a small pack, throwing in a few essentials, her fingers lingering on the locket he had given her, the only thing she could not bear to leave behind. With one last glance at the chamber that had once held her happiness, she stepped into the cool night, her cloak drawn tight around her shoulders. The forest beyond the city was dark, ancient and alive with whispers. Lyra did not care. She ran into the trees, boots pressing into the soft earth, branches clawing at her cloak and roots threatening to trip her. Every step took her further from the city, further from him, further from the life that had betrayed her. Yet even as she fled, a part of her heart twisted with fear. The forest was no friend to wanderers. Legend spoke of shadows that moved on their own, spirits that lingered where the earth had been stained with ancient curses, and creatures whose eyes glimmered with malice in the night. Lyra's breaths came in ragged bursts, fog curling around her lips. She forced herself to focus on the path ahead, the sound of her own heartbeat and the pulse of life within her. Somewhere deep down she knew that running would not erase the pain, nor would it protect her from the dangers that awaited. Yet the thought of staying behind, facing him again, filled her with a terror so raw that it propelled her forward like a flame in the wind. Hours passed. The moon rose high, pale and watchful, casting silvery light through the tangled branches. Lyra's legs ached, her stomach ached, and the cold gnawed at her skin. She paused beside an ancient oak, pressing her forehead to its bark as if drawing strength from the solid presence. The forest seemed to sigh around her, the wind carrying whispers she could not understand. Then she heard it, a low, almost imperceptible sound, like the brush of claws against stone. Her heart skipped a beat, and she froze. The air grew colder, heavier, and the shadows between the trees seemed to deepen. Lyra's instinct screamed at her to run, but she was already weary, nearly spent. Something moved in the darkness, silent and deliberate. Her mind raced, conjuring every tale of the forest's hidden terrors. A figure emerged, tall, imposing, and impossibly graceful. His presence radiated power, the kind of force that could bend men to their knees without a single word. He wore a cloak darker than midnight, and his eyes, golden, fierce, and unyielding, pierced through the gloom straight into her soul. Lyra stumbled back, her hand gripping the hilt of a dagger she had brought more for courage than hope of protection. "You should not be here," the man said, his voice calm but heavy with authority, like a storm contained within a single breath. Lyra's mouth opened, then closed. She had no words. The fear coiled inside her like a living thing, but beneath it, a strange fascination stirred. The stories were true. This was Kale, the Alpha King, feared across kingdoms for his ruthlessness and unmatched power. No one dared speak his name without trembling, and yet here he was, standing in the forest, watching her like a predator sizing up prey. I am not lost," Lyra managed finally, her voice trembling despite her efforts to steady it. Do not lie to me," Kale interrupted, stepping closer. Each movement was deliberate, precise, and terrifyingly beautiful. "I know why you are here. You flee betrayal. You seek safety. But the forest is not kind to those who wander alone." Lyra's heart pounded. How did he know? His eyes softened for a fleeting moment, just enough that she caught a glimpse of something beyond the legend, a spark of curiosity, or perhaps understanding.
I have nowhere else to go," she admitted, the words tasting bitter on her tongue.
Kale considered her silently, then nodded once. "Follow me." He led her through the forest with a confidence that left no room for argument. Lyra stumbled to keep up, the cold biting her skin, the ground uneven beneath her feet. She wanted to question him, to demand answers, but there was a power in his presence that made words seem fragile and useless. They moved in silence, only the sound of their footsteps and the whispering wind accompanying them. Finally they emerged into a clearing, where a castle rose from the earth like a sentinel of shadows and stone. Its towers pierced the sky, and its walls seemed to hum with ancient magic. Lyra's breath caught. She had heard of Kale's fortress, of the dangers that surrounded it, of the curses whispered to linger in its halls. And yet, standing before it, she felt a flicker of hope, a strange impossible thought that perhaps she could survive here. Kale stopped at the edge of the clearing, turning to face her. "This is where I will shelter you," he said, voice steady. "Not because I owe you anything, but because I choose to. No one else may interfere. Not the shadows, not the world, not even yourself, if you try to run." Lyra looked at him, heart hammering. Fear warred with something she could not name, the weight of her past, the betrayal she had endured, pressed against her chest. But in Kale's gaze, she sensed a strange invitation, not to surrender, but to endure, to survive, and perhaps to trust. I cannot stay," she whispered, almost to herself. "You can," Kale replied, simply stepping closer, so close that she could feel the warmth radiating from him despite the chill in the air. "And you will, because the forest does not forgive weakness, and neither do I." Lyra swallowed hard, torn between the urge to flee and the undeniable pull that drew her toward him. There was danger in his command, a risk she could not ignore, yet also a promise of protection, fierce and unyielding. For the first time since her world had shattered, she felt a flicker of something she had thought lost forever. Hope. But the forest whispered behind them, shadows stirring as if awakened by her presence. Lyra knew that safety was an illusion, that danger had not passed, only shifted. And yet, even as fear tightened its grip, she could not turn away from the golden eyes that held her gaze so completely. Kale's voice cut through her thoughts, soft yet unyielding. "You belong to me now, whether you wish it or not." Lyra's breath caught, her heart a wild drum in her chest. The words were not a threat, not exactly, they were a claim, a statement of power that left no room for denial. And yet, beneath the fear, beneath the disbelief, something inside her stirred. Her journey into the night, her flight from betrayal, had led her here, to the edge of darkness and power, to a king whose presence could both destroy and protect. And as the wind whispered through the trees, carrying the scent of ancient magic and the promise of danger, Lyra realized that nothing in her life would ever be the same again. For the first time in countless hours, She felt the stirrings of a choice, not of freedom, but of survival. Not of surrender, but of endurance. And in the shadow of the most dangerous Alpha King the kingdom had ever known, Lyra stepped forward, uncertain, trembling, yet unwilling to retreat. The forest waited, silent and watchful, and somewhere deep in the darkness unseen eyes gleamed, marking the beginning of a story that would test hearts, defy fate, and awaken powers long thought lost. Lyra did not yet know the cost of this choice. She did not yet understand the depths of the darkness she had entered. But as Cale led her toward the castle, the last light of the moon reflecting off its blackened walls, she knew one thing for certain: her life would never be the same. And neither would her heart. The gates of Cale's castle loomed before Lyra, massive and dark, as if carved from the night itself. Stone walls twisted with age, vines crawling across their surface like veins, and spires reached into the sky like the claws of some great beast. The wind carried whispers, leaves rustling with secrets she could not understand. Lyra's hand tightened around her cloak. She had expected danger, but nothing like this. Cale led her across the drawbridge, his golden eyes unblinking. His presence was suffocating and magnetic, a constant reminder that she was no longer her own. She tried to keep her steps even, to appear calm, but every nerve in her body screamed that she was being watched, measured, judged, and Cale was the most skilled observer she had ever encountered. "You will not wander alone in this place," Cale said, his voice smooth, almost gentle, yet carrying an edge that left no room for protest. "The castle has its own will. It tests those who enter. The weak break. The strong endure. You will learn quickly which you are." Lyra's stomach tightened. She wanted to answer, to argue that she was neither weak nor helpless, yet the weight of his gaze pinned her silence. There was truth in his words, though it stung more than any insult. She had fled betrayal, yes, but she had also stepped into unknown danger, and Cale's calm authority made clear that in this castle, power alone ruled. The halls inside were vast, dimly lit by flickering sconces. Shadows danced across the high, vaulted ceilings, twisting like living shapes. The air smelled of ancient stone and faint magic, a sharp, metallic scent that sent chills down her spine. Lyra's footsteps echoed in the emptiness, the sound amplifying her loneliness. "This is your chamber," Cale said, stopping before a large door carved with swirling runes. "It is secure. You may rest, but do not forget, you are a guest in my world, and my world does not forgive carelessness." Lyra nodded, hesitant. She stepped inside. The room was warm, far warmer than she expected, with a soft bed draped in heavy dark fabrics and windows that looked out over the forest she had just fled. She moved to the window, gazing at the trees, still shivering from exhaustion and fear. She had imagined the forest as her refuge. Instead, it had become a threshold into something far stranger, far darker. Cale remained in the doorway, silent. She could feel him even when he did not speak, the constant pressure of his presence like gravity. She turned slightly, curious despite herself. Why are you helping me?" she asked. Cale's lips curved faintly, a shadow of a smile. "Because I see what others do not."
I see your fire, your defiance. Most would flee entirely.
"You flee, yet you endure. That is rare." Lyra swallowed. His praise was unsettling. She had never thought of herself as remarkable. She had been cautious, careful, loyal, and broken. And yet he saw her in a way that cut through her shame and fear. I do not want to be in this world," she whispered. I want to leave." Cale stepped forward, silent as a shadow. "And leave you would die. The forest is no friend. Neither is the world outside these walls. You have two choices: survive within my protection, or risk everything for freedom that may not exist." Her heart pounded. The idea of being trapped, of being claimed by this dangerous man, should have terrified her. And yet, beneath that fear, something stirred. A strange comfort in his control, a warmth in his gaze. He was danger incarnate, yes, but also safety and that contradiction drew her in unwillingly. Days passed. Kale's castle was a labyrinth of stone corridors, secret passages, and rooms filled with ancient relics. Lyra explored cautiously, learning which doors were safe, which hallways whispered warnings. The castle seemed alive, responding to moods and intentions, and she realized that Kale's power extended far beyond his own presence. Magic hummed beneath every surface, subtle and insistent, like the heartbeat of the building itself. Kale observed her always, but rarely spoke unless necessary. Yet even in silence his lessons were clear. She could not defy the castle, and she could not defy him. He tested her in small ways, placing obstacles in her path, challenging her judgments, observing how she responded. Lyra grew sharper, faster, learning to read shadows and listen to whispers. And with each passing day she began to feel the tension that danced between them, a push and pull of power, fear, and something else she could not name. One evening she found herself in the library, a vast room filled with ancient tomes that smelled of dust and secrets. Kale appeared silently behind her, his cloak brushing the floor like a shadow. "You read far too much," he said softly, yet his eyes glimmered with amusement. "Knowledge is dangerous, but ignorance is fatal." "You are learning quickly." Lyra turned to face him, noticing the subtle warmth in his gaze that contradicted his reputation.
"Why are you like this? So controlled, so strong, so feared?"
she asked. Kale's expression darkened, a shadow crossing his golden eyes. "Because fear protects me. Power protects me. And trust has always been a weapon and a weakness. You should not be surprised by the caution you see in me." Lyra hesitated, sensing the truth beneath his words. "But do you ever wish for something more?" For a brief moment Kale's mask faltered. His eyes softened, glimmering with something vulnerable, almost painful. "I do not know," he admitted. "I have never dared to hope for it, and yet you are here." Lyra felt a shiver of emotion she could not name. His words were both confession and challenge, a whisper in the dark that promised both danger and longing. That night the castle was restless. Lyra could hear footsteps echoing in distant corridors, shadows shifting where no one should be. When she looked out the window at the moonlit forest, she realized the whispers of the trees were no longer just tales. They were warnings. Danger was coming, drawn by her presence and by Kale's claim. She heard a sudden crash, and the library door burst open. Kale stepped inside, cloak billowing, eyes sharp. "They have found us," he said. "You must be ready. You will not leave my side." Lyra's pulse raced. Who is coming?" "Enemies," Kale replied, his voice low and commanding. "Those who would see me fall, those who would take you. You will need to trust me completely, or you will not survive the night." The castle seemed to respond to his words. Shadows deepened, walls groaned, and the very air thrummed with anticipation. Lyra's fear surged, yet she did not flee. The thought of abandoning Kale or being abandoned herself was unthinkable. Hours later, as darkness settled like a heavy blanket, Kale led her to a hidden chamber beneath the castle. Candles flickered along the walls, casting long, trembling shadows. The room smelled of earth and old magic, and a single window opened onto the forest below. "You will stay here," Kale said, his voice soft but unwavering. "No one may enter without my leave." "Here, you are safe." Lyra nodded, swallowing hard. She wanted to resist, to protest, to claim her freedom. But every instinct told her this was the only place she could survive. Kale's presence, even at a distance, was both shield and warning. For hours, they remained in tense silence. Lyra could hear her own heartbeat, could feel the pull of something unspoken between them. The castle itself seemed to watch, waiting for what was to come. Finally, Kale spoke. "You wonder why I do not demand your obedience completely," he said, stepping close. "Because I do not need it. You are strong. You defy me, yet you follow. That is far more valuable than blind compliance." Lyra looked at him, heart racing. She could not deny the attraction she felt, fear and fascination mingling in equal measure. She had fled one betrayal, and yet here she was, drawn into the orbit of a man whose power could crush her, and whose presence made her heart ache with longing she did not understand. Cale's eyes searched hers, golden and unyielding, yet glimmering with something softer. "You will learn to survive here," he said, "and perhaps, in time, to trust me. But that is your choice. I will not force it, not yet." Lyra nodded again, her thoughts a whirlwind. Fear, desire, uncertainty, and curiosity battled within her. She had entered the castle seeking shelter, but she felt herself being pulled into a world of power and darkness that promised both danger and fascination. As she lay in the hidden chamber that night, Lyra could not sleep. The castle whispered around her, shadows curling and twisting, carrying secrets she could not yet comprehend. She thought of Cale, of his golden eyes and the strange pull of his presence, and for the first time since her betrayal, she wondered if survival might be possible, not just in body, but in heart. Outside, the wind moaned through the trees, and the forest seemed alive with movement. Lyra shivered, knowing that her journey had only just begun. She was no longer the woman who had fled betrayal. She was a survivor, and the castle, the forest, and Cale himself would test every ounce of her courage. And deep in the night, Cale's voice echoed softly through the halls, almost as if carried by the walls themselves. "Do not mistake fear for weakness, Lyra. You will learn, soon enough, that power and desire are often inseparable, and so are we." Lyra's eyes widened. She did not yet know what he meant, but she knew that the castle and the Alpha King held mysteries that would challenge everything she believed about herself. She pressed herself to the bed, staring into the shadows, wondering what the dawn would bring, and whether she could survive it. The castle waited, patient and watchful, and Lyra felt the first true stirrings of something she could not name. A dangerous, thrilling pull toward a man she should fear, yet could not resist. The roar of the creatures in the forest had not stopped with the dawn. Lyra woke to the distant sound of branches snapping in low growls that vibrated through the stone floors of Cale's castle. She shivered, pulling her cloak tighter around her shoulders. The night had been long and restless, filled with shadows that seemed to stretch into her very thoughts. Cale was already awake, standing by the window in the hidden chamber. His golden eyes glimmered with unease as he watched the forest, every muscle tense, every movement controlled. Lyra rose silently, noticing the way the sunlight caught the edges of his cloak and the sharp planes of his face. There was a weight to him, a burden she could not yet comprehend.
"They will not stop," Cale said without turning.
"The forest calls to what belongs to it. Your presence has awakened more than just curiosity. It has stirred the shadows of old grudges, and some seek to test you, to test me." Lyra's heart tightened. She had expected danger outside the castle, but the idea that her very being could summon threats beyond her understanding left her unsettled. Why me?" she asked quietly. "Why would anyone care about me?" Cale's gaze finally met hers. "Because you are not ordinary," he said, his voice soft yet heavy. "You carry fire within you. Most flee when the shadows move, but you endure. That is rare. And rare things are never left alone." Lyra swallowed, feeling a strange mixture of fear and pride. His words were like both a warning and a promise that her strength mattered, that her presence had meaning even in this darkness. Over the following days, Lyra settled into the routines of the castle, under Cale's watchful guidance. The halls were alive with whispers and shadows, but she was learning to read them, to sense danger, to understand the rhythms of the place. Cale allowed her freedom within certain limits, testing her judgment, observing how she reacted under pressure. "You are learning," he said one evening, as she practiced moving silently through the corridors. "The castle responds to those who respect it, just as it punishes those who do not. The forest, the walls, the magic, it is all alive, and it watches." Lyra nodded, feeling the weight of his words. The castle was more than stone and mortar. It was a living entity, powerful and aware. And Cale was its master, bending it to his will, yet always aware that it could turn against him. But the castle was not the only mystery she faced. One night, drawn by an inexplicable urge, Lyra found herself in a hall she had not seen before. The walls shimmered with an ethereal light, and symbols etched into the stone glowed faintly. At the center of the room stood a pedestal with a crystal pulsing with soft, silver light. Cale appeared behind her, silent as a shadow. "You have found the heart of the castle," he said. "Few have the courage to enter. Few have the awareness to even see it." Lyra stepped closer, mesmerized by the crystal. "What is this?" she asked. "It is old," Cale replied, voice low. "Older than any king, older than the first stone of this fortress. It holds knowledge, power, and truth. But it is dangerous. To touch it is to face your deepest fears." Lyra hesitated. She had fled betrayal, faced the darkness of the forest, and survived the castle's trials, yet something in her stirred at the sight of the crystal, a need to understand, to confront what had been hidden from her. Slowly she reached out, fingers trembling, and brushed the surface. A shock of warmth pulsed through her hand, spreading into her chest, and images flashed before her eyes. She saw Cale not as he appeared now, but as a young man, fierce and proud, loved and betrayed. She saw the curse laid upon him, a shadow that twisted his power into fear, a loneliness so deep it cut through centuries. The legend of the dangerous Alpha King was true, but the truth behind it was far more tragic. He had been cursed to inspire fear, to repel love, to carry a burden no one else could bear. And yet here he was, standing before her, alive and vulnerable, in ways the world would never know. Lyra staggered back, breathless. "A curse? You carry it?" Cale's eyes softened. "I do. And it is why you are here. You see me, not the shadow, not the monster, but the man beneath. That is rare, and it is dangerous. You must choose carefully, Lyra, because to stay means to risk more than your safety. It means risking your heart." Lyra felt a surge of emotion she could not control. Fear, yes, but also compassion, fascination, and a longing that made her chest ache. She had fled one betrayal only to encounter another kind of power, one that was both terrifying and magnetic. Over the next days, Cale and Lyra faced threats that tested their trust. Shadows moved in the forest, creatures drawn to her presence, and rumors of rebellion reached the castle from distant lands. Cale led Lyra through each trial with calm precision, teaching her to defend herself, to read danger, and to rely on her instincts. Every step brought them closer, not just as protector and ward, but as two hearts intertwined by circumstance and choice. One evening, as the sky bled crimson with sunset, Cale and Lyra stood on a balcony overlooking the forest. The wind carried the scent of damp earth and distant rain, and the trees swayed like silent sentinels. Lyra's heart was heavy with the weight of the curse she had glimpsed, and the responsibility that came with her presence in Cale's life. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked softly. "Saving me? Keeping me here?" Cale's gaze was steady, golden eyes reflecting the dying light. "Regret? No. Fear?
Yes, you are unusual.
You challenge me in ways few could, and that is both thrilling and dangerous." Lyra felt her pulse quicken. There was something in his words that went beyond caution. It was acknowledgement, recognition, and perhaps something more. She dared not name it for fear that speaking it aloud would shatter the fragile balance between them. "You trust me," Cale said suddenly, stepping closer. "But trust is fragile, Lyra. Fragile and dangerous. I cannot protect you from your own choices." Lyra swallowed, sensing the truth in his words. She had choices to make, yes, but in a world filled with shadows and curses, she wondered if any path would be truly safe. That night the castle stirred with activity. Cale sensed something before she did. The subtle tremor in the air, the shadows that moved with intent. He called Lyra to the central hall, a vast chamber where light and darkness danced in equal measure. "They are here," Cale said, voice low. "The creatures of the forest, drawn to you, drawn to the bond we share. We cannot fight them all, but together we have a chance." Lyra's heart raced. She had faced fear, but this was unlike anything before. The creatures were many, their shapes shifting in the darkness, eyes glowing with intent. Cale took her hand, his grip firm and steady. Stay close. Trust me. The battle was swift and chaotic. Shadows lunged, claws flashing, but Cale moved with precision, protecting her while countering the attack with strength and strategy. Lyra followed his lead, surprising herself with her own courage and instincts. Every strike, every step was a test, not just of skill but of trust. When the last shadow fell, the hall was silent, save for their breathing. Lyra's chest heaved with adrenaline, and Cale's eyes were fixed on her, golden and unyielding. "You did well," he said softly. "Far better than I expected." Lyra looked down, suddenly aware of how close they stood, how the heat of the battle lingered in their shared space. Her heart pounded, and for a moment the world seemed to shrink to just the two of them. She had come to the castle seeking shelter, and yet she found herself bound to something far greater: danger, power, and a connection that defied reason. Cale's hand brushed against hers, an almost imperceptible touch, yet it sent a spark through her. "You are learning, Lyra. Not just to survive, but to face what comes next." Lyra nodded, unable to speak. The weight of her past betrayal, the curse she had glimpsed, and the danger of the present pressed against her. Yet a strange certainty filled her. She was no longer just a woman running from heartbreak. She was becoming someone capable of endurance, someone who could face darkness and emerge stronger. And Cale was no longer just a protector or a king. He was a man with a past, a curse, and a heart that could be reached if she dared. As the night deepened, Lyra stood by the balcony once more, gazing at the forest. Shadows shifted and moved, whispering threats she could not yet decipher. The castle hummed beneath her feet, alive and watchful. And Cale appeared at her side, silent as the shadows he commanded. "Tomorrow," he said softly, "you will learn the true nature of the curse and the choice that comes with it. It will demand everything from both of us." Lyra's breath caught. She had survived betrayal, flight, and shadowed attacks, but she knew the coming days would test her in ways she could not yet imagine. And somewhere deep in her heart she knew that she could not face them alone, and perhaps she did not want to. The castle waited, the forest waited, and the Alpha King, both terrifying and magnetic, waited for her to take the next step. The night was alive with whispers, the castle trembling as if aware that the culmination of centuries had arrived. Lyra stood at the highest balcony, the wind tugging at her cloak, carrying the scent of rain, earth, and magic. Below, the forest stretched endlessly, dark and restless, as if it knew the choice she would soon face. Cale appeared beside her silently. His golden eyes reflected the moonlight, fierce and steady. He did not speak immediately. They simply stood together, the space between them charged with tension, fear, and anticipation. Lyra could feel the pulse of the castle beneath her feet, alive, waiting, as if it too understood the importance of this night. "You have been tested," Cale said at last, voice low but resonant. "By the forest, the castle, your own fears. But the final trial begins now." Lyra swallowed, heart pounding. She had survived betrayal, flight through cursed forests, and attacks by shadows of old magic. She had faced fear, danger, and the unyielding power of Cale himself. And yet, this felt heavier, closer, a weight pressing on her soul rather than her body. Cale led her through corridors lit by flickering torchlight. Shadows danced along the walls, stretching and twisting like dark fingers. The castle seemed to pulse with anticipation, the air thick with magic older than memory. They arrived at a chamber she had never seen before. The doors were carved with ancient symbols, glowing faintly with silver light. "This is the heart of the curse," Cale said. "It is where all that binds me, all that haunts me, can be faced and undone." Lyra stepped inside, eyes widening. The chamber was vast, circular, and filled with a soft, pulsing glow. In the center floated a crystal, larger than her head, radiating light that seemed to bend reality itself. The air hummed with power. Shadows moved along the walls, forming shapes of past kings, warriors, and creatures bound by magic long forgotten. Kale's voice cut through the hum. The curse is not just mine. It is ours, now, for it touches those who love, those who see beyond the shadow. To break it, one must give everything willingly. Lyra's breath caught. She thought of the forest, the betrayal she had fled, the shadows she had faced, and the golden eyes of Kale that had haunted her dreams. Her chest tightened with the knowledge that the next step would demand more than courage. It would demand her heart. "You will need to trust me completely," Kale continued, "to let the curse touch you, to bind your strength with mine. Only then can it be broken. If you hesitate, it will destroy us both." Lyra swallowed hard, heart racing. The fear she had carried for weeks pressed against her, yet beneath it, a spark of determination ignited. She had fled betrayal, survived darkness, and endured trials that would have broken others. She was no longer the frightened woman who had stumbled into the forest. She was stronger, wiser, and capable of facing whatever the castle, and Kale, could demand. "I trust you," she said, voice trembling but steady. "I choose to face it with you." Kale's golden eyes softened, a shadow of vulnerability breaking through the power and fear he always carried. "Then step forward," he said, "and prepare your heart, Lyra. This will test every part of us." Together they approached the crystal. Lyra could feel the hum of magic beneath her fingers, a pull that reached into her soul. She extended her hand, and Kale mirrored her movement. The moment their fingertips touched the glowing surface, a shock of warmth surged through them, and the chamber dissolved into light and shadow. Images flashed before Lyra's eyes. Kale as a boy, full of hope and pride, betrayed by those he loved. Battles fought and lost, allies turned enemies, centuries of fear and solitude. She saw herself in the shadows too, fear and loss mirrored in her own past. The crystal pulsed, responding to their combined presence, the light bending around them like living water. The curse was a living thing, ancient and unyielding, seeking to divide, to destroy, to isolate. Lyra felt it clawing at her mind, testing her resolve, whispering doubt. "You must fight it," Kale's voice echoed in her mind as well as through the chamber. "Do not let it claim you. We face it together." "Breathe, Lyra, and trust me completely." Lyra closed her eyes, focusing on his voice, on the warmth of his hand, on the certainty of his presence. She let go of fear. She let go of shame. She let go of the pain her previous mate had caused. She opened her heart fully, offering it freely to the man who had claimed her. Not by force, but by recognition of strength, courage, and fire. The crystal flared. Light and shadow collided, swirling around them in a storm of energy. The castle shook, walls groaning, the air shimmering with raw power. Lyra and Kale held firm, hearts and wills aligned, until the surge of magic reached a crescendo. Then, with a sound like shattering glass and a cry that echoed through time, the chamber stilled. The light softened, the shadows dissipated, and the crystal's glow faded into a calm, steady radiance. Lyra opened her eyes. Kale was before her, golden eyes no longer shadowed with a curse, his shoulders relaxed, yet still strong. He reached for her, and she met him halfway, their hands clasping. There was no fear now, only understanding, trust, and an unspoken bond forged in fire, darkness, and choice. "The curse," Kale whispered, voice thick with relief and awe. "It is broken." Lyra looked at him, heart racing. "We did it, together." Kale nodded, a small smile breaking across his usually stoic features. "Together. And now, everything changes." The castle itself seemed to breathe with them, walls settling, shadows retreating, and the air filled with the hum of magic no longer oppressive but protective. The forest outside shifted too, the wind gentle, the trees calm, as if acknowledging the breaking of centuries-old fear. Lyra felt a surge of emotion, relief, triumph, and an undeniable connection to the man before her. She had fled betrayal, faced danger, endured trials, and now stood at the center of a myth reborn, herself and Cale, free from the chains of the past. For the first time, Cale's gaze softened completely. He reached for her face gently, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "You are extraordinary," he said. "Not because you survived, but because you dared to trust, to give your heart when the world told you not to. That is what makes you strong, Lyra." Lyra's chest tightened, and tears pricked her eyes. She had expected danger, power, and fear, but never the possibility of belonging, of love returned with equal measure. She had come to the castle running from heartbreak, yet she realized now that she had found something far greater, a bond forged in trust, choice, and courage. Cale drew her close, their foreheads touching, breath mingling. "We are bound," he whispered. "Not by curse, not by fear, but by choice, and by what we have endured together. That is stronger than anything else." Lyra pressed herself to him, feeling the strength, warmth, and steadiness of his presence. "I choose this," she said softly. "I choose you, and I choose you," Cale replied, voice resolute yet filled with something softer than fear or command. "Now and always." The night stretched around them, peaceful at last. Shadows no longer moved with intent, the wind carried no warnings, and the castle hummed with quiet life. Lyra and Cale stood together on the balcony, gazing at the moonlit forest below, hearts aligned, their bond sealed by choice, trust, and the trials they had faced. Lyra's mind drifted to the life she had once known, the betrayal, the heartbreak, the flight, and she realized that every step had led her here. The pain had shaped her, the fear had honed her, and the courage she had found within her survival. She had found love, yes, but love intertwined with strength, trust, and power, a love that could endure darkness without being consumed. Cale turned to her, golden eyes reflecting the rising sun, no longer shadowed by curse or fear. "The kingdom waits," he said. "The world may never understand us, but we will face it together. Nothing can undo what we have forged here." Lyra smiled, a soft, steady light in her chest.
"Together?" she repeated.
And as the first rays of dawn broke over the horizon, spilling gold and silver across the castle walls, Lyra knew that her life had transformed completely. She had survived heartbreak, endured trials, faced darkness, and chosen to trust, and in doing so, she had found a bond that was stronger than fear, stronger than betrayal, stronger than any curse. The castle, the forest, and the Alpha King no longer held threats for her. They held home, strength, and love. And Lyra, standing beside Cale, knew she would never run again. The wind whispered through the towers, soft and gentle now, carrying the promise of new beginnings. The shadows had retreated, the curse was gone, and the two hearts that had endured so much now beat as one. The legend of the dangerous Alpha King and the woman who chose him would be told for generations, not as a tale of fear, but as a story of courage, trust, and love that could conquer even the darkest magic. Lyra smiled, letting the warmth of dawn wash over her. The world was wide, full of possibility, and she was ready to face it, all with Cale by her side. And in that moment, the kingdom, the castle, and the forest seemed to sigh in unison, as if acknowledging that the darkness had passed and a new legend had begun.